The file begins. By 2026, the laughter had curdled. The once beloved image of Pa's Rob Riggle, the boisterous Marine, the reliable funny man, was now just debris in the blast crater of his divorce. This wasn't the quiet separation of 2020. This was a public dissection, a forensic accounting of a marriage's bitter end, played out in court filings that read like spy fiction. The public perception was no longer happily divorced, it was extremely messy, a mutilated fate. The core of the scandal wasn't infidelity, it was something colder. Pause. The court documents spoke of hidden cameras, of private moments cataloged and stored, of a trust so completely violated it bordered on psychological warfare. Then came the accusations of theft. Not just money, but heirlooms, personal effects, pieces of a shared life allegedly spirited away in the dead of night. The shockwaves of betrayal were still resonating. The man who built a career on broad smiles was now the subject of grim whispered speculation. His home, once a sanctuary, had become a crime scene. The year that followed was an audit of a haunted man. The financial toll was brutal, a quiet hemorrhage of assets documented in sealed pages. But the psychological cost was the true sentence. He was a ghost haunting the sets of his own comeback attempts. Projects like Road Dogs and Jimmy were meant to be a new chapter. Instead, they became backdrops for his paranoia. Every shadow held a lens. Every quiet moment was an invitation for an echo of the past. This was the anatomy of his fall. Not a sudden plunge, but a slow erosion of self. The invasion of privacy had left him permanently exposed, vulnerable. His performances, once confident and commanding, now carried a new, brittle energy. A man trying to make a room laugh while constantly checking over his shoulder. The past wasn't just a memory. It was a persistent hum, the low frequency of a recording device that was never truly turned off. His success was a brightly lit mansion, but he was now condemned to live in its basement, listening to the floorboards creak above. But he wasn't always a ghost. Before the paranoia, there was a code, a rigid framework of honor and duty forged in the unforgiving heat of places the public relations team would later erase from his biography. He was a man of two worlds. Pause. Lieutenant Colonel Riggle commanded respect with orders. Comedian Rob Riggle commanded rooms with punchlines. He believed in the chain of command and the sanctity of the green room. Two different kinds of trust, but trust nonetheless. This duality was his brand, his unique selling proposition in a town full of single-threat talents. His ambition smelled of jet fuel and stale beer, a potent cocktail that propelled him from barracks to box office. He built a life on the principle that your flank was always covered, a fatal architectural flaw. The foundation of that trust was a 21-year contract, a marriage, a merger that predated the fame and was supposed to outlast it. In the public ledger, they were a blue-chip stock, the all-American family unit, solid and dependable. But behind the closed doors of the estate, the silence grew. It was a tangible thing, thick as velvet and just as good at smothering sound. The partnership slowly morphed into a holding company. He was the asset, the face of the brand. She became its quiet, efficient manager. Then came the small discrepancies, whispers in the accounts, numbers that didn't add up, like a quiet alarm no one could yet hear. Pause. He started to feel it first, the unsettling sensation of being a stranger in his own home. A misplaced object, a conversation that felt rehearsed. The cold, prickling awareness of an unseen audience in his most private sanctuary. That unseen audience had a name and a lens. The discovery wasn't dramatic, it was banal, which made it all the more grotesque. A routine check of a smoke detector in his home office. A small dark circle that wasn't supposed to be there. A digital eye patiently recording. He soon found another. And another. A silent network of surveillance woven into the very fabric of his sanctuary. The lawsuit that followed was not a plea for money, but an inventory of sins. A formal declaration that his home had been turned into a soundstage for a private, humiliating broadcast. The legal documents described it as an invasion. It was an autopsy. Every private conversation, every unguarded moment, every cash withdrawal from his personal safe, cataloged. Pause. The recordings spanned 10,000 clips, proof that the woman he shared a life with had become his personal archivist of ruin. The digital ghost in the machine wasn't just watching, it was counting. The footage from the home office camera became Exhibit A in a second colder lawsuit. The charge was simple: grand theft. The video clips, time-stamped and undeniable, showed his wife accessing the safe while he was away, taking stacks of cash. It wasn't a one-time act of desperation, it was a system, a quiet, methodical bleeding of his personal reserves. The court filings put a number on the betrayal. Pause. $28,000. A figure that was simultaneously trivial for a man of his means and monumental in its implications. This wasn't about the money. It was about the cold, calculated execution. Each withdrawal was a nail hammered into the coffin of their shared history. His reputation, built on the image of a lovable, boisterous fool, now had a new bitter addendum. The man who could make a nation laugh couldn't see the predator living under his own roof. But the $28,000 was just the entry wound. A superficial injury. The real damage was structural, buried in the foundation of his life. The camera, his silent digital witness, recorded more than just the methodical theft of cash. It recorded the anatomy of a deeper betrayal, a second act. In the grainy footage, time-stamped to a week before the first withdrawal, pause. Tiffany is seen entering the office not to take, but to plant. A small, innocuous device disguised as a smoke detector installed directly above his desk. His sanctuary, the place where deals were made and scripts were read, had been turned into a hostile listening post. The hunter had been the prey all along. The secret evidence was not just his video, but the potential existence of her recordings. An unknown quantity of his private conversations, his business secrets, his moments of vulnerability, now cataloged by an adversary. The charge of theft was dwarfed by the indictment of espionage. This was no longer a domestic dispute. It was a Cold War fought in the quiet suburbs of Los Angeles. The divorce proceedings of 2025 became the public theater for this private war. This was the messy spectacle, the direct consequence of a trust so thoroughly violated it had inverted into paranoia. Her legal team weaponized his camera. They painted him as the aggressor, a man who spied on his own wife. His lawyers countered with the smoke detector, portraying her as a calculating agent of sabotage. The narrative was the prize. The battleground was the tabloids. Was he the decorated Marine hero, betrayed and plundered? Or was he the controlling husband, using technology to monitor his family? The public record swelled with allegations. He accused her of hacking his life. She requested a restraining order, citing a fear of being watched. Every motion filed was a fresh volley of ammunition. Every hearing, another chapter in the public autopsy of their 21-year union. The comedy roles he was slated to play in Code 3 and Bad Man suddenly felt like a bitter irony. The man paid to make America laugh was now the protagonist in a tragedy of his own making, his personal life a far darker comedy than anything he could perform on screen. The anatomy of the fall was brutal. The laughter he manufactured for a living now echoed back as mockery. His public image, once a carefully constructed fortress of military honor and goofy charm, was systematically dismantled. Every court filing was a demolition charge. He was no longer a hero, he was a case study. A cautionary tale whispered at Hollywood parties. The damage was not in the legal fees, but in the poisoning of the well. Casting directors now saw a liability. A man whose name was irrevocably tethered to a scandal of domestic surveillance and bitter recrimination. This was the true meat grinder of fame. It doesn't just take your money, it takes your narrative. It rewrites your past and mortgages your future. His greatest role became that of the fallen husband, a part he never auditioned for but was now forced to play on a loop in the tabloids. The lowest point wasn't a single event. It was a creeping realization. The silence from his phone, the polite deflections from agents, the cold, sterile loneliness of a house that was once a home, now just a crime scene in an ongoing psychological audit. His legacy was being written in real time, and the ink was pure acid. The final verdict is never delivered in a courtroom. It is rendered in the quiet that follows. This is the post-mortem audit of a mangled fate. The projects slated for 2025 and 2026 are not a comeback tour. They are life support, an attempt to prove viability after catastrophic organ failure. Each roll, a small piece of evidence that the brand is not entirely toxic, but the scars remain. The trust, pulverized into fine dust. His story became a bitter legacy for the digital age, a warning that the person you share your bed with could also be the archivist of your ruin. The home is no longer a sanctuary. It is a potential black site, wired for betrayal. What remains of Paw's Rob Riggle is a man forced to rebuild his empire from its own rubble, forever shadowed by the ghost of a hidden camera. He is a monument to a modern tragedy. A man who went to war for his country only to find the most devastating enemy was waiting for him at home. The ultimate lesson is cold and simple. In the 21st century, there is no such thing as a private life. Pause. There is only public demolition.